It's now my pleasure to introduce our next session, a fireside chat focusing on how to ensure a responsible recovery following the COVID-19 pandemic. This promises to be a fascinating discussion between two global leaders, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, and Guy Cormier, President and Chief Executive of the Desjardins Group. While I'm keenly interested in their views on the economy, pandemic response, and fair domestic and international recovery, I look forward to hearing their views on greener recovery and climate change. As the founder, former president, and CEO, and current chairman of ACON, a Canadian leader in construction and infrastructure development, I've always kept a close eye on industry and global trends over my 50-plus year career. ACON has long been a sustainable organization, from connecting communities to clean energy projects and working with species for decades. We've been working sustainably day in and day out. As we've evolved, though, we now have a true consciousness of sustainable practices. This year, through our Building Better Together initiative, we're proud to set specific targets and goals, including achieving a 30% reduction in direct CO2 emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. With that, I'm pleased to now introduce Guy Cormier, who will provide a more formal introduction.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning.
Thank you very much.
Like they said, my name is Guy Cormier. I'm the president and CEO of the Desjardins Group. Bonjour, Madame la Mairesse. Bonjour, Messieurs Rémillard. Un plaisir d'être avec vous ce matin.
Hello, Ms. Mayor of Montreal, Mr. Rémillard.
Montreal, with a one-on-one discussion with the Managing Director of the IMF, Mrs. Kristalina Georgieva. Bonjour, Madame Georgieva. Welcome to the Montreal Conference.
Bonjour à tous et merci beaucoup pour l'invitation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I am extremely happy to be with you today.
And very much look forward to the questions you would pose to me. But also, let me say, I haven't been in Montreal for quite some time. Happy to be back despite the fact that it is virtual. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We all know that you are the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. You oversee a $1 trillion budget for member countries and manage 2,400 staff from over 160 countries. And before joining the IMF, you were the CEO of the World Bank, where you also served as the interim president for 3 months. And before that, you were European Commission Vice President for Budget and Human Resources. And among other issues, you coordinated the EU's response to the euro area debt crisis and the 2015 refugee crisis. You hold a PhD in economic science and a MA in political economy and sociology from the University of National and World Economy. In 2010, you were named European of the Year and Commissioner of the Year by European Voice. In 2020, you received the Atlantic Council's Distinguished International Leadership Award for your exceptional career in public service. Thank you very much, Kristalina, again, for being there, for being here with us. And without further ado, let's just start with our first topic. The pandemic is not over yet, and nevertheless, economic activity must resume to meet the needs of the populations. What is the IMF view on the global outlook right now, risk, and the steps policymakers need to take to ensure a strong, a fair, and a sustainable recovery?
Thank you very much, Guy. Very kind introduction. We are living through a crisis like no other. Never in our history we would ask producers to not produce and consumers not to go out and consume. And that's exactly what we had to do in 2020. What has happened since is remarkable. First, we got the scientists delivering vaccines in record time. I want to pay tribute to them and pay tribute to the health workers who have made it possible for us to regain confidence that we can get on top of this health crisis. And second, we have seen policymakers from around the world acting swiftly to put a floor under the world economy. Fiscal measures that have been deployed in advanced economies like Canada amount to 28% equivalent of GDP. And we have seen also the monetary response from central banks to come with a huge force. As a result of these two remarkable achievements, the world economy now is on a sounder footing. We are projecting for this year global growth to be around 6%. And for next year, also a reasonably strong growth, way over 4%. But we have to recognize that we don't all share the same economic fortunes. In fact, what we see in the world is a dangerous divergence between the countries that can deploy massively support for their economies and their people, that are vaccinating at very high rates their populations, and those that cannot do either at the scale that is necessary. Let me just give you an illustration of how significant the divergence in capacity to help is. I mentioned in advanced economies, 28% equivalent of GDP in fiscal and policy measures. In emerging markets, it is about 6%. In low-income countries, it is only 2% of a much smaller GDP they rely on. On that, compounding this underpinning divergence factor of policy support is the divergence in vaccinations. And I cannot stress enough how critical it is for all of us that we manage to bring vaccinations everywhere to the level that would guarantee the recovery to be sound. And you asked me what are the measures policymakers need to deploy? Well, number one, make sure that the health system can withstand this pandemic. And the best protection we have in our hands are vaccines. But we also need to have the doctors and the nurses equipped with capacity to act. It is paramount to have the PPEs in place to respect public health measures. Before we started this conversation, I asked you about mask mandate in Canada. You said you confirmed it is still in place. This is helping us all, while the pandemic is around us, to increase the level of economic activity. Second, we have to provide in a more targeted manner now that the worst is behind us. In other words, policy measures cannot be withdrawn rapidly because the pandemic hasn't gone away yet. But they have to be targeted in a much more prudent and calibrated manner to where they would make a difference. We have seen in the pandemic how part of the economy is really hurting, especially contact industries, but another part, especially the digital, the one that makes it possible for you and I to talk, it has been up and running, virtually digitalization on steroids. That within our economies also means that support has to be targeted differently. And last but not least, and I hope we will talk more about it, how do we shape up the economy of tomorrow? We know that you cannot drive only looking at the rear view mirror. What we learned from history is not enough to shape a future that is more inclusive, more resilient, a future that provides more opportunities to people. And beyond that, if you don't vaccinate the world, this will continue to go around and hurt us. And then we will have to wrestle with, I call it a yo-yo recovery. We open, we close, we open, we close. The economy accelerates, decelerates, with the consequences that you as a business person are very familiar with, erosion of confidence that we cannot afford to have.
Thanks, Kristalina. I heard we so many times, we. It's so obvious from my perspective that we all need to roll up our sleeves and really work together to help for the recovery. And I know as a fact that the Desjardins Group and many other financial institutions in Canada, we roll up our sleeves in the last few months to really implement recovery measures, emergency measures, relief individuals, people, and businesses to continue to manage their business and try to go through the pandemic. So yes, it's a we answer to go through this pandemic. And there's no doubt in my mind that the pandemic, yes, has caused a lot of collateral damage, pain, and suffering. But I think your answer was really regarding vaccination, how important it plays an important role to protect people, but also the livelihood of the economy. And back in May, Desjardins Group and also many other financial institutions and companies opened our doors to vaccination, mainly in Quebec. But you said really clearly that vaccination is, from your perspective, the most important economic policy that we have to implement in the next few weeks, few months.
L'économie a besoin de cet effort de vaccination. Et je sais que au mois de mai, au Fonds monétaire international, vous avez travaillé avec l'Organisation mondiale du commerce, avec la Banque mondiale, avec l'OMS. Pourriez-vous partager le plan que vous avez accompli? Quelles sont les avancées pour les mois et les années suivantes? Oui, il est extrêmement clair que par rapport aux politiques, pour les politiques vaccinales cette année et l'année prochaine, cela sera aussi important, sinon plus important que les politiques fiscales et économiques pour la reprise complète de nos économies. Et selon cette perspective, au FMI, pour la première fois de notre histoire, nous avons vu l'intégration des données épidémiologiques dans notre analyse économique. Il y a une corrélation très claire entre le niveau de vaccination et la force du système de santé et la situation de l'économie, également la vitesse de la reprise économique. Il y a un lien. Deux de mes collègues, le chef économique, un collègue très, très intelligent, et mon autre collègue ont établi un plan très clair chez nous, au FMI, mais cela a été également appuyé par l'OMS, par la Banque mondiale et par les organisations internationales. Donc, au cœur de ce plan, il y a un message très clair. Nous devons avoir un but clair de manière à relever l'économie et cet objectif pour cette année doit être la vaccination d'au moins 40% de la population dans tous les pays. Bien entendu, au Canada, le taux de vaccination est plus élevé. Pour l'année prochaine, on parle de 60% de la population vaccinée. Pourquoi? À ces niveaux-là, on verra une accélération de la reprise économique. Et bien entendu, on va pouvoir préparer un terrain fertile pour faire en sorte que la pandémie soit sous contrôle. Alors, on a confiance que cela est possible. Nous avons travaillé avec les fabricants de vaccins et on peut dire oui, nous aurons le nombre de doses nécessaires pour l'objectif d'aujourd'hui et de l'année prochaine. Et il y a un prix à tout cela, 50 milliards de dollars. Actuellement, plus de la moitié est déjà sécurisée, mais malheureusement, il faut qu'il y ait encore un effort collectif nécessaire pour se mobiliser. Alors, qu'est-ce que tous ces fonds seront en mesure de faire? Garantir que la production vaccinale va être nécessaire ou même être au-delà. Pourquoi au-delà? On a déjà vu le besoin de ces doses supplémentaires, les boosters, et dans les autres pays. Alors, on voit que dans certains pays, c'est moins efficace. Dans certains pays en développement, c'est moins efficace.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting myself because I'm getting interpretation in French that comes in parallel with what I say. So this is to technical support. Please take care of this. Going back to my main point is that we know we have to overshoot. We have to fund more than technically is necessary. We also know that in developing countries, the buying a vaccine is only a small part of the problem. The big problem is delivery, refrigeration, nurses and doctors available in remote places. And we also recognize that there has to be an investment in surveillance around the world. So if a mutation appears in one place, it's like a fire started that we can put down as quickly as possible. Why the four organizations came together? Because we are the four corners that the international community has put exactly for a crisis like this. And joining forces means the World Bank massively increasing their financing. They're actually committed to provide 20 billion in support of developing countries. The World Health Organization mobilizing the money to go where the money is needed. The World Trade Organization fighting something very, very serious and unfortunately still alive, and it is trade restrictions. Trade barriers on the way of vaccinations means we are shooting ourselves in the foot. And the IMF, using its a strong voice for the rationale, the economic rationale, adding it to that community. Let me finish by saying that we have done also a calculation. What is the benefit of this 50 billion? What if we get this pandemic under control faster? And the benefits are about $9 trillion over 5 years, of which 1 trillion would go as tax revenues because of accelerated economic activities in advanced economies. To put it very bluntly, that is probably the best value for money investment we can make in our lifetimes. So for those who are listening, if you have a way to advocate for vaccinating the world, making health systems around the world stronger, more resilient, use your voice.
Thank you very much, Cristalina. I think this message for solidarity with low-income countries is emerging countries is quite evident. And since the beginning of the pandemic, the international community really provide emergency financing and debt relief. And at the same time, recently the fund, like you said, issued a historical allocation of special drawing rights amounting to $650 billion and made wide-ranging reform to try to help poorest member countries. So is there other comments or other views regarding how do you see international cooperation during the crisis, or any other message?
Well, we have to be honest with ourselves. Yes, there has been a great deal of cooperation globally. This pandemic made us very sober about our interdependence. But there has been also a bit of preoccupation with domestic issues, understandably so, and yet it is on the way, unless we overcome it, on the way of the recovery that would benefit each and every one of us. At the IMF, from the beginning of this crisis, virtually the first days, when it became clear what kind of a crisis, unusual crisis we are faced with, we stepped up very rapidly the provision of financial lifelines. You are in financial services, you would immediately understand that if you are a country all of a sudden losing most of its revenues and faced with increased expenditures for medical purposes, unless there is a place to turn to for financing, emergency financing, it would be catastrophic. People would die unnecessarily. So we provided these financial lifelines to 86 countries. Never in the history of the IMF we have done so much so fast. But we also recognize that there is something that we can do if all of us come together that would add precious reserves and capacity to our members, our weaker members in particular, and it is called special drawing rights. Many people, probably many people on this call, don't know what it is, so let me just explain it very briefly. It is the ability of the International Monetary Fund to use the strength of its members that have strong reserves and strong economies to then pass the benefit of this strength to the weaker members. We issue special drawing rights as a reserve asset, and then we distribute to all members according to their shares at the IMF. After 2009, when we had the global financial crisis, the IMF issued $250 billion special drawing rights, equivalent special drawing rights. Obviously, this crisis is much more severe. It is truly global. It affects everybody everywhere. So the membership wisely agreed to the proposal we made for a very large special drawing rights allocation. On 23rd of August, it became effective. But let me make a point about thinking bigger than the allocation itself. Thinking big means, can we do even more? And what we are now appealing to with our strong members is you're getting your reserves as everybody else. And actually, the advanced economies, the richer countries are getting a bigger share than the poorer countries of this allocation because they are bigger shareholders at the IMF. You don't really need it. Can you lend us part of it so we can on-lend it to the countries that are in desperate need of help? And to my great satisfaction, and that speaks about the strength of the collective, we are now in intense discussions. Some of our members actually set up a target. They said, let's aim for 100 billion to on-lend at concessional terms to the countries in need. We are making very good progress. At the IMF, we have a special trust. It is called Poverty Reduction and Growth Trust. It provides zero interest rate, longer maturity lending to poor countries. And I am confident we are going to massively increase the capacity through this trust. And we are discussing, and I'm very excited about it. I am an environmental economist by training. We are discussing the creation of resilience and sustainability trust that would allow to use that resource to boost a green recovery, a sustainable recovery, to be part of the transformation of the world economy that if we are wise collectively, we can achieve as we strive to come out of this health crisis.
Well, Kristalina, thank you so much. I think we would continue this discussion for hours, probably. It is so interesting. This year, our topic is regarding fair and greener recovery, because the pandemic has caused not only an economic but a social turmoil. But it also gives us, I think, one lesson is that our well-being and our security depend of the well-being and the security of others too. And the IMF calls us toward this active solidarity that we all need right now. So I really hope that you all enjoy Catalina's comments, because for the rest of the conference, there's many other topics and discussion regarding our recovery. But launching this conference with Catalina is really, really appreciated. So thank you very much personally, but also for all the audience that is with us right now. It's really, really appreciated. And just continue what you are trying to do as much as you can around the globe. Thank you very much. It was a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Guy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.